Remnant. Grimm-infested territory. 3 weeks after fall of Beacon. The dust anomaly pulsed with energy that made reality itself uncomfortable. Not the familiar crystalline glow that Remnant's power source normally exhibited, but writhing distortion that looked like space was being digested from within. Colors that shouldn't exist, bleeding through dimensional membrane that physics insisted should be absolute. Ruby Rose stood at the anomaly's perimeter with crescent rows deployed in scythe configuration, her silver eyes tracking phenomenon that Beacon Academy's limited surviving databases had no classification for. Voice carrying a cross-communication network that connected her team despite Beacon's fall, having scattered Huntsmen training across Remnant. Weiss, Blake, Yang, visual confirmation. We've got dust behavior that's completely outside normal parameters. It's reacting to aura proximity, getting stronger when we get closer. That's not how dust works. That's not how any of this works. Weiss Schnee adjusted position with Mertenaster ready. Glyphs flickering around her feet with readiness that Schnee family combat training had made instinctive. Ruby, my dust reserves are destabilizing just being near this thing. Ice dust is crystallizing spontaneously. Fire dust is heating beyond safe storage temperature. Gravity dust is creating localized distortions. This isn't natural phenomenon. This is something responding to our presence specifically. Blake Belladonna maintained stealth position with Gamble Shroud's ribbon extended. Her faunus hearing detecting sounds that human perception couldn't register. Whispers that seemed to come from anomaly itself. Voices speaking in language that made her inner ear ache. I'm detecting movement inside the distortion. Not Grimm signatures. Something else. Something that feels wrong in ways I don't have words for. We should establish wider perimeter. Call for Huntsmen backup. This exceeds student-level mission parameters by significant margin. Yang Xiaolong cracked knuckles with Ember Celica loaded and ready, her combat instincts screaming warnings that years of brawling had refined into reliable threat assessment. Or we could do what we always do. Go in swinging, figure it out as we go. That's worked pretty well so far. Most of the time. Okay, like 40% of the time. But that 40% was really impressive. Yang, that's terrible tactical logic, came John Ark's voice across communication network as Team JNPR approached from opposite vector, his leadership of second team having improved dramatically since Beacon despite lacking the natural combat talent his teammates possessed. We're supposed to investigate, not engage blindly. Professor Ozpin specifically said, Professor Ozpin is missing. Pira Nikos interrupted gently, while Milo and Akoo remained ready in rifle shield configuration. Her champion-level tactical awareness processing battlefield with precision that tournament experience had cultivated. Along with most of Beacon's command structure, that means field decisions fall to team leaders present. Ruby and John need to coordinate assessment. Standard protocol. Reconnaissance first, engagement only if necessary. Nora Valkyrie's enthusiasm carried across channel with energy that made serious tactical discussion sound like party planning. But if we do have to fight something, I call dibs on hitting it really hard. Magnhild is charged and ready. I've been practicing my smash first, ask questions while they're unconscious technique. It's very refined. That's not refined. Lyren observed with calm that made chaos sound manageable. His Stormflower pistols tracking potential threat vectors with discipline that years of partnership with Nora had made automatic. That's just hitting things without asking questions at all. But tactical point stands. We have 2 full teams present. Combined aura capacity exceeds what most Grimm can withstand. If engagement becomes necessary, we possess capability to handle standard threats. RWBY processed team input with leadership responsibility that Fall of Beacon had forced upon 16-year-old who'd been promoted to team leader through potential rather than experience. All right, standard formation, RWBY takes point, JNPR provides support and watches our flanks. We approach the anomaly carefully, we gather data, we don't engage unless something forces our hand, and if this turns out to be another situation where ancient evil awakens and tries to kill us all. Her voice carried weight that recent trauma had cultivated. We handle it like we always do. Together. They advanced with coordination that beacon training had refined, despite teams being formed only months earlier. Weapons ready but not aggressive. Aura shields active but not flaring with combat intensity. Professional caution that Huntsman doctrine demanded when facing unknown variables. The anomaly responded to their approach, not subtly, not gradually building intensity that gave them opportunity to retreat. Immediately, violently. With hunger that made response seem almost alive. Energy tendrils erupted from Distortion's center like predators striking prey, lashing toward team members with speed that made evasion difficult. Each tendril carrying dust signature that matched specific team members' aura, targeting them individually rather than attacking indiscriminately. "Scatter," RWBY commanded while using her semblance. Petal burst that let her move at velocities that made her form blur into rose petals. Speed that exceeded what normal human or faunus could achieve. Evading tendril that would have caught her mid-motion. Weiss deployed glyph chain with Schnee hereditary semblance that made her family legendary. Summoning platforms that defied gravity, creating barriers that redirected attacks, manipulating battlefield through constructs that most huntsmen couldn't replicate. It's learning, adapting to our movement patterns. Whatever this thing is, it possesses tactical intelligence. Young engaged tendril targeting her with combination of Ember Celica's shotgun gauntlets and her semblance. Burn that converted damage received into strength, making her more dangerous the more she was hurt. Good. I prefer enemies that fight back. Makes victory more satisfying when Her punch connected with tendril. Energy discharge making air crackle. Beat them into understanding that messing with my team was really bad idea. But the anomaly's response exceeded their threat assessment. The distortion expanded with violence that suggested it wasn't attacking them. It was consuming them, pulling all 8 huntsmen toward aperture that looked like wound in reality itself. Gravitational force that dust manipulation shouldn't be capable of generating. And through that aperture, roar that made every combat veteran's instincts scream recognition. Grimm, not standard Beowulf or Ursa. Not even Alpha class that experienced huntsmen engaged cautiously. Something massive. Something that made the anomaly look like doorway rather than phenomenon. Something emerging with presence that suggested this entire situation had been trap rather than investigation opportunity. The creature that forced itself through dimensional tear stood 15 meters tall with wingspan that made aerial combat its natural domain. Never more variant, but enhanced, corrupted, changed by whatever forces had created the anomaly. Bone armor that looked almost metallic. Eyes glowing with intelligence that standard Grimm lacked. RWBY's silver eyes widened with recognition that transcended simple threat assessment into genuine fear. That's not normal Grimm behavior. They don't use tools, don't manipulate dust, don't! Her tactical analysis caught up to situation. Don't bait traps specifically designed to catch huntsman teams. This thing was waiting for us. Someone or something set this up deliberately. Questions later, John shouted while raising Crocea Moores in defensive stance. His tactical leadership overriding natural tendency toward analysis paralysis that combat experience was slowly eliminating. We stopped that thing first. Standard Grimm engagement protocols. Pyrrha, Blake, flank and create firing angles. Nora, Ren, disable mobility. RWBY, Yang, draw aggro. Weiss, support and control. I'll coordinate and cover gaps. Move. The fight escalated with intensity that made training exercises look inadequate. Yang overcharging burn through accepting hits that would incapacitate normal fighter. Converting pain into explosive output that made her strikes carry tons of force. Weiss deploying high-tier glyph chains that created 3-dimensional battlefield where gravity became optional. Pyrrha manipulating metallic debris through polarity semblance that gave her telekinetic control over ferrous materials, turning environment into weapon. But every aura expenditure made anomaly stronger. Every semblance activation fed energy into distortion that was growing rather than shrinking. Dimensional tear widening with each combat exchange. Reality becoming increasingly unstable, as combined aura output from 8 talented huntsmen exceeded whatever threshold the anomaly had been designed to exploit. It's feeding on us. Blake realized while evading Nevermore's talons with agility that faunus physiology enhanced. Our aura is powering it. The more we fight, the worse this gets. We need to... The Nevermore's wing blade attack forced her to dodge rather than complete tactical assessment. Gamble Shroud's ribbon barely redirecting strike that would have bisected her. Pyrrha covered Blake's exposed position with debris shield. See her polarity pulling metal fragments into defensive barrier. We can't retreat. That thing will pursue. Will attack populated areas if we lead it away from containment. We have to eliminate it here despite empowering the anomaly. That's... Her tactical mind recognized impossible choice. That's no-win scenario. Either we fight and make situation worse, or we flee and endanger civilians. There's no good option. Then we make bad option work, RWBY declared with determination that leadership responsibility demanded. Her crescent rose firing high-caliber rounds that made sniper rifle doubles as war scythe. Each shot precisely targeted at Nevermore's joints, where bone armor was weakest. We end this fast. Maximum output. All semblance is active. We overwhelm it before the anomaly can fully destabilize. That's our only chance. They committed. All of them. Simultaneously. With coordination that months of training together had cultivated into unconscious synchronization. RWBY's pedal burst, accelerating her into velocity that made her attacks impossible to track. Yang's burn pushing her strength beyond safe limits. Weiss's glyphs creating platforms that defied physics. Blake's shadow clones providing impossible angles of attack. Pyrrha's polarity hurling tons of debris. John's aura amplification supporting his team through enhancement that his unique semblance provided. Nora's electrical absorption converting dust energy into raw power. Ren's aura masking reducing team's threat signature while increasing combat effectiveness. The Nevermore fell under coordinated assault that would have impressed Beacon's most experienced professors. Our 8 students demonstrating why Huntsmen academies invested years training potential defenders of humanity. But their victory was catastrophic. The combined aura spike, 8 semblances active simultaneously at maximum output, exceeded whatever threshold the anomaly had been building toward. Reality screamed, not metaphorically. Actual sound that made their ears bleed despite aura protection. Space-time fabric tearing with violence that suggested universe was rejecting their continued presence. Dimensional barrier failing in way that remnants physics couldn't account for. Blinding flash consumed everything. Light that transcended simple photonic emission into something that felt like existence itself was being rewritten. Sensation of falling that had no direction because directions themselves were becoming meaningless. RWBY's last conscious thought before displacement was reaching for her team, trying to ensure they stayed together despite reality, deciding they shouldn't exist in current configuration. Then nothing, then something, then impact. They crashed into different world with violence that made landing feel like being born. Sudden, disorienting, accompanied by sensory input that made no sense until consciousness adapted to processing information that evolution hadn't prepared them for. RWBY groaned while forcing herself upright from crater that their arrival had created. Every aura-enhanced sense screaming confusion about environment that felt wrong in ways she couldn't immediately articulate. Sound off. Everyone okay? Anyone injured? Blake, Yang. Why, Weiss. Status report. Conscious but confused, Weiss reported while checking Mertenaster for damage, her analytical mind already processing discrepancies between expected environment and actual surroundings. RWBY, where are we? This isn't Remnant. Architecture is wrong, technology level is wrong, sky color is wrong, everything is wrong. Define wrong more specifically, Blake requested, while her faunus senses detected civilization that smelled different from Vale or Mistral. Cooking styles that used spices Remnant didn't cultivate. Exhaust from vehicles that ran on fuel composition her nose couldn't identify. And most significantly, complete absence of Grimm presence that should have been detectable if they were still on Remnant. I'll tell you what's wrong, Yang said while examining Ember Celica with professional concern that weapon maintenance had become second nature. We just fought transdimensional Grimm, got caught in reality-tearing dust explosion, and apparently crash-landed in city that's not on any map I've memorized. That's pretty comprehensive wrongness. On scale of 1 to 10, I'd rate our current situation at about completely screwed. Team JNPR emerged from adjacent impact crater with varying degrees of disorientation. John looking distinctly nauseous from dimensional transit, Pyra maintaining composure through champion-level discipline, Nora bouncing with energy that suggested she found reality displacement exciting rather than terrifying, Ren processing situation with calm that made catastrophe manageable. We're not in Remnant anymore, Pyra stated with certainty that came from analyzing stars that were visible despite daylight, constellations that didn't match anything astronomy classes had taught. Different stellar positions, different atmospheric composition affecting light diffraction. This is... She searched for classification that training hadn't provided. This is different planet, or different dimension, or different reality entirely. We've been displaced across barriers that shouldn't be crossable. Before anyone could formulate response to that existentially disturbing assessment, voice carried across from position above their crater with tone mixing curiosity and aggression. Oi, Deku! Someone just blew up half the training field, and they're standing in the crater like explosion was normal thing. What kind of quirk does that? RWBY looked up to see figures in distinctive costumes approaching. Teenagers approximately her age wearing outfits that suggested either school uniform or tactical gear. Expressions mixing professional alertness with genuine confusion about 8 armed individuals who'd appeared from nowhere. And the blonde boy in the lead radiated aggression that made Yang's combat enthusiasm look restrained, his hands crackling with what appeared to be controlled explosions that physics shouldn't allow human body to generate safely. Weapons ready, RWBY commanded quietly while raising crescent rows to defensive position. We don't know if this world is hostile. Don't attack first. But be prepared to defend if they... Villains! The explosive blonde declared while launching himself toward them with speed that suggested either exceptional training or enhanced capabilities. You're villains who just used destructive quirk in public training area. Surrender now or I'll blast you into next week. We're not villains, RWBY protested while using pedal burst to evade explosive assault. Her speed making blonde boy's attack look sluggish by comparison. We're huntresses! We don't even know where we are! Her explanation was interrupted by ice wall erupting between teams. Massive barrier of frozen water that appeared spontaneously without apparent source. Temperature dropping so rapidly that moisture crystallized from air. Creation suggesting someone possessed cryokinetic ability that rivaled Weiss's dust manipulation. Stand down, commanded boy with distinctive red and white hair, his voice carrying authority that suggested leadership despite apparent age. Both sides, we assess situation before assuming hostility. You, he addressed RWBY and JNPR. Identify yourselves, explain how you arrived, and explain why you're carrying weapons that exceed civilian regulations in Hero Society. Hero Society? Blake repeated with confusion that suggested terminology didn't translate to her experience. What's Hero Society? And what are quirks you keep mentioning? None of this makes sense. Reality had broken, and both teams were about to discover that sometimes displacement meant more than simple geographical relocation. Sometimes it meant encountering world that operated on fundamentally different rules, where powers came from genetics rather than soul, where monsters didn't exist, where being hero meant something completely different, and where Team RWBY and JNPR's arrival might be catalyst for convergence that neither universe was prepared to handle. Musutafu City, UA High School Training Ground. Minutes after arrival, the standoff held with tension that made miscommunication feel inevitable. Team RWBY and JNPR maintaining defensive positions with weapons drawn. UA Class 1. A students adopting combat stances that suggested professional hero training despite their youth. Both groups evaluating threats they didn't understand through frameworks that didn't apply to current situation. Katsuki Bakugo's hands crackled with nitroglycerin-based explosions that his quirk generated from sweat. His aggressive posture radiating impatience that made diplomatic resolution seem unlikely. I don't care what you call yourselves. Huntresses, villains, cosplayers with really dangerous props. You blew up training field and you're armed with weapons that look like they could level buildings. Or surrender now or I'll... You'll what, exactly? Yang Xiaolong interrupted, while Ember Celica's barrels rotated with mechanical precision that made threat unmistakable, her combat instincts recognizing fellow brawler whose aggressive style matched her own. Threaten us more? Because, sweetheart, I've fought actual monsters. Giant death machines, terrorists with military-grade equipment. Your light show is impressive, but it's not making me want to surrender. It's making me want to see whose explosion is bigger. And trust me. Her semblance flared with golden energy that made her hair ignite metaphorically. Mine are way more satisfying. Yang, don't antagonize the potentially hostile locals, Weiss hissed while maintaining ice barrier through dust manipulation. Her tactical assessment recognizing that red and white-haired boys' cryokinesis rivaled her own capabilities. We're trying to establish that we're not threats. Challenging them to combat effectiveness comparison undermines that diplomatic objective. I'm not being antagonistic, Yang protested with grin that suggested she absolutely was being antagonistic. I'm being friendly. This is how I make friends, through punching things together. It's very bonding. Shoto Todoroki studied the ice barrier with professional interest that transcended immediate tactical situation, his analytical mind processing construction that matched his own Quirks output despite appearing to originate from crystalline substance, rather than his half-cold, half-hot ability. That's not ice generated from Quirk. That's ice created through external medium. The girl with white hair, she's manipulating what appears to be crystallized energy source. That's... His voice carried confusion. That's not how Quirks work. Quirks are biological, genetic. You can't use external tools to replicate Quirk effects unless you're specifically support equipment user. What are you? We're Huntresses, Ruby Rose replied with earnest honesty that made her sound younger than her combat capability suggested, lowering Crescent Rose slightly to demonstrate non-aggression while maintaining ready position. We fight Grimm, protect people. We use aura and semblances and dust. We're from Remnant. Except we're apparently not in Remnant anymore because nothing here makes sense, and you keep using words like quirk that we don't understand, and... She took breath. And we really need someone to explain where we are before misunderstanding gets people hurt unnecessarily. Izuku Midoriya's analytical mind, enhanced by years of hero research and obsessive note-taking, processed Ruby's statement with speed that One for All couldn't replicate, his voice carrying curiosity that transcended caution. Aura, semblances, dust. Those aren't quirk-related terms. Those suggest completely different power system, different origin, different mechanics. You're saying your abilities come from... He searched for appropriate classification. From something other than genetic mutation that quirks represent. Our powers come from our souls, Pira Nikos explained with champion-level composure that made complex metaphysics sound straightforward. Her polarity semblance keeping metal debris in orbit around her position as unconscious demonstration. Aura is manifestation of our essence, our life force. Semblances are unique expressions of that force, personal abilities that reflect our nature. And dust, she gestured toward Weiss, is naturally occurring energy source that we manipulate through aura. It's not genetic. It's not biological mutation. It's fundamental aspect of who we are as beings. Silence descended as UA students processed explanation that violated everything their society understood about superpowers. That's impossible, declared voice-carrying authority that made students immediately snap to attention. Shota Aizawa, approaching with his capture weapon ready, an expression mixing professional skepticism with tactical wariness. His erasure quirk already active through bloodshot eyes that made maintaining eye contact uncomfortable. Powers that come from soul rather than genetics. That's mysticism. That's not science. That's... He activated erasure fully while focusing on Ruby. Nothing happened. Ruby's aura didn't flicker. Her silver eyes remained their distinctive color. Crescent Rose didn't suddenly become too heavy to wield, despite being mechanical scythe that required enhanced strength to use effectively. Aizawa's expression shifted from skeptical to genuinely concerned. My quirk erases other quirks through visual contact. It's never failed against any superhuman ability I've encountered. But you... His voice carried weight of implications he was processing in real time. You're not affected. That means either you're quirkless and using support equipment so advanced it mimics superhuman capability, or... He didn't want to finish that sentence. Or your abilities aren't quirks, aren't biological, aren't anything my erasure can affect because they operate on completely different principles. We tried to tell you. Nora Valkyrie interjected with enthusiasm that made serious revelation sound like party announcement. We're from different world, different dimension, different everything. We got sucked through magic portal thingy while fighting giant deathbird. Now we're here and you're there and nobody understands anything. It's very confusing but also kind of exciting. Before Aizawa could formulate response, massive figure descended from sky with impact that shook ground, all might arriving in his muscular form, and symbol of peace, radiating presence that made professional heroes look inadequate by comparison. Young Aizawa, young students, I detected explosion and came to ensure everyone's safety. Are these... His expression shifted as he registered 8 armed teenagers in defensive formation. Are these new students? Very enthusiastic about weapons training, perhaps too enthusiastic given property damage. They're not students, Aizawa replied with exhaustion that suggested this situation exceeded his already impressive tolerance for absurd complications. They're dimensional refugees who claim their powers come from souls rather than genetics, and my erasure can't affect them. And I'm about 3 seconds from calling Principal Nezu because this is way above my classification level. All Might studied RWBY and JNPR with assessment that decades of hero work had refined, his expression shifting from jovial to serious as he processed tactical implications. Young heroes, and I use that term despite not knowing your allegiance, I am All Might. Symbol of peace. Number 1, hero. And I need to understand. Are you threat to this city? To these students? To civilian population? Answer honestly, because... His power flared unconsciously. Because if you represent danger to innocents, I will stop you regardless of whether my attacks affect your unusual abilities. RWBY met his eyes with silver gaze that carried weight beyond her apparent age. Voice firm despite facing hero whose presence made her combat instincts scream warnings about power differential. We're not threats. We're protectors. We fight monsters called Grimm that are attracted to negative emotions and want to kill everyone. We were investigating dust anomaly in our world when something went catastrophically wrong and we ended up here. We don't want to hurt anyone. We don't want to cause problems. We just... Her voice caught. We just want to understand what happened and figure out how to get home. That's all. We're not villains. We're not invaders. We're just lost. The honesty in her statement made All Might's combat posture relax fractionally. His hero instincts recognizing genuine distress rather than deceptive manipulation. I believe you, young lady. Your eyes carry weight of someone who's fought to protect others, who's seen darkness and chosen to stand against it. That's hero's conviction regardless of which world you're from. But, his expression remained serious. But you're carrying military-grade weapons in civilian area. You've demonstrated abilities that our society's regulations don't account for. And your arrival created energy signature that probably attracted every villain organization's attention within 100-kilometer radius. That makes you liability even if you're not intentionally hostile. We need to secure you, need to understand what you are, and need to determine whether we're going to destroy Hero Society's carefully maintained balance. Blake Belladonna finished with bitter accuracy that suggested she'd been refugee before, understanding how displaced people were treated when they represented unknown variable. Whether we're too dangerous to integrate, whether convenient solution is imprisonment until you figure out what to do with us. I've heard this speech. Different world. Same prejudice against those who don't fit established categories. That's not what I was going to say. All Might replied with gentle firmness. I was going to say we need to determine whether you need our help. Because young heroes who fight monsters and protect innocents sound like people who deserve assistance when they're stranded far from home. Not suspects requiring containment. Heroes look after each other, regardless of origin. Before conversation could progress, alarm activated across UA's campus with urgency that suggested immediate crisis. Emergency broadcast that made every student's phone simultaneously alert with priority notification. Villain attack in progress, Aizawa said while checking message with professional speed. Downtown District, League of Villains signature detected. His expression darkened. They're specifically targeting location where dimensional energy spike was detected. They know about your arrival. They're coming to investigate what you are. Probably planning to capture you for study, or recruit you for whatever insane scheme Shigaraki is planning this week. Then we fight, John stated with leadership authority that Fall of Beacon had forced him to develop. His tactical mind recognizing that proving themselves through action would accomplish more than continued explanation. You need to stop villains. We need to demonstrate we're allies, not threats. Logical solution is joint operation where we work together. You see our capabilities, we see yours. Everyone learns whether cooperation is viable, and villains get stopped before they hurt civilians. That's optimal outcome for all parties. Students don't engage League of Villains, Aizawa declared with teacher's authority that made refusal absolute. That's professional hero responsibility. He gestured to Class 1A. Return to campus, maintain secure perimeter, and U8. He looked at RWBY and JNPR. Oh, you stay here under guard until we determine— No, Ruby interrupted with quiet firmness that made refusal sound inevitable rather than defiant. We're huntresses. We don't stand aside when people need help. When villains attack. When civilians are in danger. That's not who we are. That's not what we do. You can try to stop us, but— Her silver eyes met his without flinching. But we're going anyway. With your cooperation or despite your opposition. Because where we're from, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And we're not going to do nothing just because we're in unfamiliar dimension. Bakugo's grin suggested he'd found kindred spirits. I like her. She's got fire. Deku, can we keep them? They're not pets. Kachan. Midoriya replied while processing that dimensional refugees were about to engage League of Villains despite having no understanding of local threat assessment. But his analytical mind recognized opportunity. But if they're going anyway, having Class 1A provide support might prevent them from accidentally making situation worse through unfamiliarity with how villains operate here. We could coordinate, share tactical information, ensure they understand local combat protocols before they— Explosion interrupted discussion as downtown area visible from training ground erupted with signature energy discharge that made All Might's expression shift to immediate alarm. They're not waiting, All Might observed while already moving toward crisis. Young Aizawa, coordinate student evacuation. I'll engage League of Villains directly, and you 8. He looked at RWBY and JNPR. If you're determined to help, then help properly. Follow my lead, protect civilians, don't engage enemies you don't understand, and prove that your world's heroes operate with same principles ours do. Show me that trusting you wasn't mistake. They moved as impromptu coalition, All Might leading with speed that made his muscular form blur. Class 1A students following despite Aizawa's protests because hero training meant running toward danger rather than away. And RWBY and JNPR bringing up rear with weapons ready and aura shields active. Ruby fell into stride beside Midoriya while both ran toward combat zone, her curiosity overriding tactical focus. So your power comes from genetics? From being born different? Not from training your soul? For most people, yes, Midoriya confirmed, while One for All enhanced his speed to keep pace with Ruby's enhanced physiology. Quirks are genetic mutations that appeared several generations ago. About 80% of population has some kind of superhuman ability. But there are exceptions. People like me who— he hesitated— who received power through other means. Special circumstances. It's complicated. Everything's complicated, Ruby replied with smile that made dimension displacement sound manageable. But complicated is better than boring. And I think— her expression shifted to combat readiness as they approached battle zone. I think we're about to discover whether your heroes and our huntresses can work together when things get really complicated really fast. The downtown district had transformed into war zone. League of villains deploying with coordination that suggested this wasn't random attack but calculated operation. Nomu engaging heroes with strength that made All Might's power look matched rather than overwhelming, and coordinating everything. Tamura Shigaraki studying dimensional refugees with interest that made his strategic intentions clear. "Capture them," Shigaraki commanded, while his decay quirk reduced concrete to dust with casual touch. "I want to know what they are, what they can do, and whether they can break Hero Society's carefully maintained order. New pieces on the board, new variables that heroes can't account for." "That's..." His smile was unsettling behind hand covering his face. "That's exactly what we need to make this game interesting again." Yang cracked her knuckles with grin that made impending combat look appealing. "Okay, mysterious villain guy. You want to see what we can do? Let me give you demonstration. Consider this educational outreach, teaching you why kidnapping huntresses is really, really bad life choice." She charged with Ember Celica blazing. Burn already building from minor hits she'd taken during dimensional transit. Combat enthusiasm that made professional heroes look restrained. And League of Villains discovered that sometimes dimensional refugees brought more than confusion. Sometimes they brought entirely new category of threat. One that didn't follow established power scaling. One that operated on principles Hero Society hadn't encountered. One that made carefully balanced conflict between heroes and villains suddenly become unpredictable. Musutafu's city. Downtown battle zone. 30 minutes into engagement. The combat had devolved into controlled chaos that made standard villain encounter protocols look inadequate. League of Villains discovering that dimensional refugees fought with lethality that Hero Society's non-lethal doctrine didn't prepare them for. Class 1A. Students realizing that huntresses treated urban warfare like natural environment, rather than complication requiring special training, and All Might processing that these 8 teenagers possessed combat experience that exceeded most professional heroes despite their apparent age. Yang Xiaolong fought Nomu with enthusiasm that made the bioengineered monster's shock absorption seem inadequate, each punch from Ember Celica carrying force amplified by Burn's semblance. Her golden aura flaring brighter with every hit she absorbed, strength escalating beyond what normal human physiology could generate, even with quirk enhancement. "Come on, big guy. Is that the best you've got? I fought bigger, meaner, way uglier." And they all learned the same lesson: don't mess with my hair. Her haymaker connected with impact that created shockwave. Nomu stumbling backward despite its enhanced durability. Yang's combat effectiveness forcing League of Villains to reassess threat level they'd initially classified as manageable. "She's not using quirk," Shigaraki observed while maintaining distance from direct engagement, his analytical mind processing combat data that didn't match established patterns. "That golden energy isn't biological mutation, it's something else. Something our intelligence has no classification for. And her strength is increasing. Not plateauing like quirks should, escalating like she's building toward threshold we haven't seen yet. That's..." His voice carried fascination mixed with concern. "That's exploitable if we understand mechanism, but dangerous if we don't." Weiss Schnee engaged League's ranged combatants with precision that made her family's military contractor background evident. Glyphs creating platforms that gave her 3-dimensional mobility. Dust manipulation providing elemental attacks that rivaled top-tier quirks, tactical coordination with Blake that suggested extensive combat partnership. "Blake, left flank. Compress and spinner attempting pincer maneuver." Blake Belladonna responded with shadow clone technique that made her appear to be in multiple locations simultaneously. Gamble Shroud's ribbon extending to entangle Spinner's blade, while her faunus agility let her evade Compress's spatial compression. Quirk. Confirmed. Engaging. Weiss, provide ice barrier on my mark. Their coordination forced League combatants to retreat. Professional villain experience proving inadequate against team tactics that Beacon Academy had refined through actual life-or-death scenarios rather than training exercises. Shoto Todoroki fought alongside them with growing respect for combat methodology that prioritized efficiency over spectacle. His ice matching Weiss's dust constructs in synchronized barrier that trapped League's advance. Your teamwork exceeds what our class has achieved. You're not just fighting together, you're fighting as integrated unit where each member compensates for others' weaknesses. How long have you been training? About 8 months, Weiss replied while deploying glyph chain that created stepping stones for Blake's aerial assault. Since we formed teams at Beacon Academy, though we've been in actual combat against Grimm, terrorists, and, her voice carried weight, and other threats that made training very practical very quickly. When you're fighting monsters that want to eat everyone, you learn teamwork fast or you die. There's not much middle ground. Izuku Midoriya engaged beside RWBY with One for All, providing strength enhancement that let him keep pace with her pedal burst speed, both combatants operating at velocities that made their movements blur. RWBY, villain with duplication quirk at 3 o'clock. He's creating clones to overwhelm through numbers. RWBY's response was immediate. Crescent rows transforming to sniper configuration mid-motion. High-caliber rounds eliminating clones with precision that made each shot count. Her silver eyes tracking targets faster than normal human perception. Thanks for heads up. These villains are tricky. Way more coordinated than Grimm. Grimm just charge mindlessly, but your villains actually think and plan and... She ducked under counterattack. And that makes them way more annoying to fight. Grimm charge mindlessly? Midoriya repeated while delivering One for All enhanced punch that shattered concrete. What kind of enemies are these, Grimm? You keep mentioning them but never explaining. Monsters attracted to negative emotions, RWBY replied while using pedal burst to reposition behind enemy line. They want to kill all humans. They're made of darkness and hate, and they dissolve when you kill them so there's no bodies. And they're... She paused mid-combination, as her combat instincts registered something that made her silver eyes widen with alarm that transcended immediate tactical situation. They're here. Oh no, 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 no. They followed us. The dimensional breach didn't close. It stabilized. And now they're coming through and this world has no idea what's about to... The sky darkened. Not from clouds. Not from weather phenomenon that meteorology could explain. From presence that made atmosphere itself uncomfortable. Wrongness bleeding into reality like infection. Negative emotion that permeated Musutafu, accumulating into beacon that creatures designed to hunt such emotions could detect across dimensional barriers. And through tiers in space that were forming spontaneously above city. Roar that made every RWBY and JNPR members' combat training scream recognition, while UA students froze with confusion about sound that biology shouldn't produce. Grimm. Not single specimen. Not scout-level Beowulfs that novice huntsmen engaged for training. Pack-level manifestation. Multiple species. Attracted by League of Villains attack that had created exactly the kind of fear and chaos that served as Grimm beacon across dimensional distances. Beowulfs materialized first. Wolf-like creatures of shadow and bone, eyes glowing red with hunger that made normal predators look rational by comparison, howling with voices that made sound itself feel corrupted. Then Ursai, bear variants that stood 3 meters tall, armored in bone plates that conventional weapons struggled to penetrate, charging toward civilians with single-minded destruction that their nature demanded. And circling above, Nevermore that dwarfed the corrupted variant they'd fought in Remnant, wingspan casting shadow that covered city blocks, screeching with sound that shattered windows through acoustic force alone. All Might stared at manifestations with expression mixing professional assessment and genuine incomprehension. What are those things? They're not Nomu. Not any quirk-based creation I've encountered. They feel wrong, like they shouldn't exist, like reality itself is rejecting their presence. They shouldn't exist here, Pyrrha Nikos confirmed, while Polarity pulled metal debris into defensive barrier, her champion-level composure cracking under recognition that their displacement had consequences beyond personal inconvenience. Grimm don't cross dimensional boundaries. They're tied to Remnant. bound to our world's unique properties. The fact that they're manifesting here means, her tactical mind processed implications, means dimensional barrier is permanently compromised. It means your world now has connection to source of creatures that have been trying to exterminate humanity for millennia. Means we didn't just bring ourselves. We brought our apocalypse. The Beowulfs engaged indiscriminately, attacking League of Villains, heroes, civilians, anything that registered as living, their nature making them weapons that served no faction except destruction itself. Compress attempted spatial compression on approaching Beowulf, his quirk activating successfully, Grimm vanishing into marble-sized sphere that should have contained it indefinitely. The marble shattered. Beowulf emerged unaffected, lunging at Compress with claws that normal biology couldn't produce, forcing him to dodge with panicked speed that suggested his confidence had evaporated. "They're immune to quirks," Compress shouted while retreating from creature that shouldn't exist. "Spatial manipulation didn't work. What are these things?" "They're death," Blake stated with grim certainty, while Gamble's Shroud's blade cut through Beowulf that was pursuing Class 1A, students who'd frozen in shock rather than engaging unknown threat. They're manifestations of destruction given form, and they don't follow your rules, don't respect your quirks, don't care about hero-villain dynamics. They just kill everyone, everything, until they're destroyed or until nothing living remains. Katsuki Bakugo engaged Ursa with explosive assault that would have eliminated most quirk-based opponents, his hands generating detonations that cratered pavement and shattered structures. The Ursa tanked explosions with bone armor absorbing kinetic force, retaliating with swipe that caught Bakugo mid-combination, sending him crashing through building wall with impact that would have killed quirkless human. "Bakugo!" Midoriya screamed, while One for All propelled him toward friend who'd been swatted like insect. Genuine fear making his voice crack because Kachan didn't get hit like that, didn't take damage that made him look vulnerable rather than unstoppable. Yang intercepted Ursa before it could follow up on Bakugo's downed position, her burned semblance flaring golden with accumulated damage from earlier combat, strength that had been building throughout engagement finally unleashing with haymaker that made previous punches look restrained. "Nobody hurts my friend's friends. That's like extended friendship network violation, and I take that very personally." Her strike connected with force that made physics uncomfortable. Ursa's bone armor cracking under impact that exceeded what normal matter could withstand. Creature stumbling backward with injury that made its immortal nature seem questionable. "Their armor has weak points," Yang shouted while pressing advantage with combination that made professional brawlers look amateur. "Hit them hard enough in right places and they go down. Don't try fancy quirk tricks, just hit them until they stop moving. It's very straightforward." "That's not helpful tactical advice," Todoroki protested, while Ice attempted to freeze Beowulf that was charging toward civilian evacuation route, his quirk proving partially effective. Creature slowing but not stopping, cold affecting it less than normal biology would suggest. "We need specific vulnerabilities, weak points, some kind of systematic approach to their heads," Ren called while Stormflower's pistols fired with precision that made marksmanship look easy. "Decapitation works reliably. Destroying core body mass works. Excessive trauma to any major system works. They're not invulnerable. They're just more durable than you're used to fighting. Adapt your tactics and you can—" The Nevermore descended with dive that made aerial bombardment look casual. Wing blades launching like missiles, each feather carrying enough mass to penetrate concrete, targeting UA students who'd never encountered threat that operated from three-dimensional combat space. "Scatter!" Aizawa commanded, while Capture Weapon attempted to entangle Nevermore, despite it being aerial target that his ground-based tool wasn't optimized for. "Don't cluster! Make yourselves harder to—" RWBY was already moving. Petal burst carrying her toward Nevermore with speed that made her form dissipate into rose petals, crescent rose transitioning to scythe configuration mid-flight. Silver eyes gleaming with something that transcended normal combat focus into activation that Beacon's instructors had warned her about using unless absolutely necessary. Silver eye power flared. Not fully. not the uncontrolled burst that had emerged during fall of Beacon when Pyrrha died. And RWBY's grief became weapon, controlled activation, focused discharge. A learned application that months of desperate training had refined from unconscious reaction into deliberate technique. The light that erupted from RWBY's eyes made reality itself uncomfortable. Pure energy that Grimm were fundamentally vulnerable to, power that targeted their essential nature rather than physical form, ability that legend said came from God of Light himself, granting humanity weapon against darkness. The Nevermore screamed, not with pain because Grimm didn't feel pain, but with recognition that it was being unmade at fundamental level, its essence dissolving under light that rejected its existence. It fell from sky as dissipating shadow, bone armor crumbling to nothing, red eyes fading to black. Creature that had been threatening entire city reduced to particles that vanished before hitting ground. Silence descended as everyone, heroes, villains, students, civilians, processed what they'd just witnessed. RWBY landed with crescent rows deployed defensively, breathing heavily from exertion that Silver Eye activation demanded, her voice carrying across battlefield with authority that transcended her apparent age. Listen, all of you, heroes, villains, I don't care about your conflicts right now. Grimm are here, in your world, and they're attracted to negative emotions, fear, anger, hatred, panic. Every fight you have, every villain attack, every moment of civilian terror, it calls more of them, makes them stronger, draws bigger and worse variants until your entire world is drowning in creatures that want nothing except to kill everything. If you don't, her silver eyes tracked remaining Grimm that were still engaging. If you don't learn to control your emotions, to fight without fear, to protect without creating more negativity than you're eliminating, then your world ends. Not eventually, soon. Because Grimm don't stop, don't negotiate, don't get tired or bored or give up. They just keep coming until nothing lives. That's what they do. That's what they are. And now they're your problem too. All Might processed her warning with hero's instinct that recognized genuine existential threat rather than exaggerated danger. Young lady, RWBY, how do we stop them? If our quirks don't work reliably, if they're attracted to emotions we can't simply eliminate, if they keep coming as long as negative feelings exist. His voice carried weight of symbol of peace, recognizing his smile might not be enough. How does your world survive creatures like this? We train, Pyrrha replied, while polarity hurled debris at Beowulf Pack with lethal precision. We become huntsmen and huntresses who fight without fear. We learn to control our emotions even during combat. We develop aura to protect us and semblances to give us edge. And we accept, her champion's composure cracked fractionally. We accept that sometimes accepting casualties is only way to prevent worse outcomes. That perfect victory isn't possible against enemy that respawns as long as negativity exists. We don't win. We survive. We protect what we can. We mourn what we lose. And we keep fighting because alternative is extinction. Before anyone could formulate response to that existentially grim assessment, and new presence announced itself with energy signature that made dimensional fabric uncomfortable. The tears in reality widened. Not bringing more Grimm, bringing something else. Something that Remnant's legends mentioned but modern Huntsmen rarely encountered. Something that made standard Grimm look manageable by comparison. The figure that emerged through largest dimensional tear stood humanoid but wrong. Skin pale as death. Red markings covering body in patterns that suggested veins carrying corruption rather than blood. Eyes that glowed with intelligence that normal Grimm lacked, and radiating from it. Aura that suggested this creature possessed powers that RWBY and JNPR understood intimately. That's not possible, Weiss whispered with aristocratic composure shattering into genuine fear. That's Salem's faction. That's one of her inner circle. That's... Her voice dropped. That's what happens when Grimm and human merge. When someone accepts corruption fully. When person becomes monster through choice rather than transformation. And if she's here... The figure smiled with expression that made malevolence look casual. Little huntresses, little heroes. You've created wonderful opportunity, opened pathway between worlds, given Salem access to fresh population that knows nothing of her, nothing of Grimm, nothing of how to resist corruption that fear provides. This world, her gesture encompassed Musutafu. This world will fall so much faster than Remnant, because you've never learned to control emotions that summon your doom. Welcome, her smile widened, to End of Hero Society. We'll build something better from ashes. And Team RWBY realized their displacement hadn't just brought them to different world, it had brought apocalypse with them. Musutafu City, downtown battle zone, the convergence point, the corrupted figure. Salem's emissary, whose name RWBY didn't know but whose presence made their combat instincts scream warnings about threat level exceeding anything Class 1A had encountered, stood amid dimensional tiers that continued widening, each aperture bleeding more Grimm into reality that had never been designed to contain them. Voice carrying across battlefield with authority that made villain monologuing sound inadequate by comparison. This world is already broken, already divided. Heroes and villains playing eternal game while civilians cower and hope they're not caught between. So much fear, so much anger, so much delicious negativity that calls my children like beacon across dimensions. You've built perfect breeding ground for Grimm without even knowing they existed. That's... Her smile was predatory. That's almost artistic in its efficiency. All Might stepped forward with symbol of peace presence that made his muscular form seem larger than physics allowed. Voice carrying determination that decades of being hero had refined into unshakable conviction. You're wrong about this world. Wrong about heroes. Wrong about thinking fear will break us. I've spent my life proving that smiling through adversity, protecting those who can't protect themselves, standing as symbol that darkness can be overcome, that these principles matter more than power. And I won't let creatures from another dimension destroy what we've built through sacrifice and dedication. Bold words, the emissary replied while Grimm continued manifesting around her like honor guard. But words won't stop what's coming. Can't undo dimensional bridge that little huntresses created. Can't eliminate Grimm that are already here, already feeding, already multiplying through fear your villain attacks generate constantly. Every crime, every battle, every moment of terror your society produces, it calls more of us, makes us stronger. You're not fighting invasion. You're fighting consequence of your own dysfunction made manifest. Ruby Rose moved to stand beside All Might with crescent rose deployed and silver eyes gleaming with determination that transcended exhaustion from earlier silver eye activation. You're right that we opened this pathway. Right that we brought Grimm to a world that wasn't ready for them. But that means stopping them is our responsibility. Fixing what we broke. Teaching this world how to fight enemies that normal combat can't handle. And, her voice hardened with resolve that leadership demanded. And proving that hope matters more than fear. That standing together against extinction beats accepting corruption. That's what Huntsmen do. That's what heroes do. And if you think we're going to let you turn this world into another remnant where humanity huddles behind walls waiting to die, she raised her weapon. You're about to learn why Salem hasn't won in centuries despite trying. Because we don't quit. We don't surrender. We don't accept that darkness is inevitable. We fight, every single time, until we can't anymore. And even then, her silver eyes met the emissary's red gaze without flinching. Even then, someone else picks up the fight. Because that's what it means to protect people. You never stop. You never give up. You never let monsters win just because winning looks impossible. Izuku Midoriya processed Ruby's declaration with analytical mind, recognizing philosophy that matched his own, despite coming from different world, and voice carrying across to his classmates with conviction that One for All had given him purpose to express. She's right. We've been training to be heroes, to protect people, to stand against threats that normal civilians can't fight. And these Grimm... He looked at creatures that were engaging both heroes and villains indiscriminately. These Grimm are exactly the kind of threat we trained for. We don't understand them yet, don't know their weaknesses, don't have experience fighting them, but we can learn, we can adapt, we can... His voice rose. We can work with Team RWBY and JNPR who've been fighting these things their whole lives, learn from their experience, combine their knowledge with our quirks, and prove that heroes from two different worlds can protect everyone when they stand together. The nerd's actually making sense, Katsuki Bakugo muttered while pulling himself from rubble where Ursa had thrown him. His pride bruised more than body, despite taking hit that would have hospitalized most people. I hate when he makes sense, but he cracked his neck with audible pop. But I hate monsters that hit me more. So yeah, let's kill these Grimm things, learn how to fight them properly, and show dimensional invaders why pissing off heroes is really bad strategic choice. Yang, he called to blonde brawler who'd helped him earlier. You said hit them hard in right places. Show me where right places are so I can blow them up more effectively. Yang Xiaolong grinned with expression mixing combat enthusiasm and genuine respect for fellow explosive fighter. Now you're talking my language. See that bone armor? Hit the gaps between plates, target joints where they move, and if you're really strong, she demonstrated with haymaker that cracked Ursa's chest armor. Just punch through the armor entirely. Very satisfying. Would recommend. Weiss Schnee coordinated with Shoto Todoroki with tactical efficiency that their similar backgrounds made natural, both fighters understanding precision combat from aristocratic training. Your ice quirk and my dust manipulation can create combination barriers that Grimm struggle to penetrate. We establish defensive perimeter, protect civilian evacuation routes, and let close combat specialists engage Grimm in controlled environment where collateral damage is minimized. Agreed, Todoroki confirmed, while ice and dust constructs merged into barrier that was stronger than either could produce independently. But we need to address dimensional tiers that keep producing more Grimm. If we just fight defensively, we'll be overwhelmed through attrition. We need offensive strategy that closes those portals. I can help with that, Pera offered, while polarity manipulated metal debris into projectiles that struck Beowulfs with lethal precision. Grimm manifestation is tied to negative emotion concentration. If we can reduce fear and panic, if we can get civilians to calm down, the portals should destabilize. It's not permanent solution, but it buys us time to develop actual plan instead of reactive scrambling. Lyren finished while his emotion-suppressing semblance activated aura-based ability that couldn't eliminate fear entirely, but could dampen it enough to make Grimm attraction less intense. My semblance masks emotional signatures, makes targets less visible to Grimm, but I can only affect small groups. Need wider-scale emotional management that your society's hero presence should theoretically provide. If symbol of peace, he looked at All Might. If symbol of peace can inspire calm instead of just confidence, and that might reduce negative emotion enough to starve dimensional tiers of energy they're using to stabilize. All Might processed tactical assessment with decades of hero experience recognizing valid strategy. I can do that. I've spent my career making people believe everything will be okay, that heroes will handle crisis, that civilians should trust rather than fear. But his expression acknowledged limitation. But my time in muscular form is limited. 3 hours per day maximum. If I exhaust that reserve calming civilians, I won't have power remaining for actual combat. That's tactical trade-off with significant risk. Then we cover that risk, Blake Belladonna stated while shadow clones engaged Beowulf pack, her tactical flexibility making multi-front combat manageable. Huntsmen operate in teams specifically because individual limitations are compensated through group coordination. You handle emotional management and morale. We handle Grimm elimination. Your students handle villain containment since League of Villains is probably planning to exploit this chaos. And Dimensional Emissary. Her gold eyes tracked Salem's representative. Dimensional Emissary is target that requires concentrated assault from strongest combatants. Ruby's silver eyes can hurt her. My semblance can create tactical openings. Weiss's dust provides elemental flexibility. Yang's raw power can overwhelm regeneration. We don't need to kill her. Just drive her back through portal and collapse it before she can return. Sound strategy, Shota Aizawa acknowledged, while his capture weapon entangled Grimm that was approaching injured civilian, buying time for rescue despite his erasure being useless against creatures that didn't use quirks. But we're missing critical component. We don't know how to collapse dimensional portals. That's not standard hero curriculum. We've never encountered anything like this. We have, John Ark said with leadership authority that months of desperate survival had forced him to develop despite initial combat inadequacy. His tactical mind processing what his limited combat skill compensated for through strategic thinking. During Fall of Beacon, we encountered similar dimensional instability. Cinderfall's faction used method that, he paused, while processing memory that was traumatic for multiple reasons. Method that required overwhelming energy discharge at portal's focal point, basically overloaded until containment fails and dimensional barrier snaps back to stable configuration. Problem is, his voice carried weight. Problem is that requires power output that most Huntsmen can't achieve. Requires maiden-level energy or equivalent, and we don't have maidens here. But you have me, All Might stated with recognition of what task demanded. United States of Smash is my most powerful technique. Punch that channels everything I can generate into single overwhelming strike. If I target Dimensional Tear's weakest point with full power, he processed implications. I can collapse it, but that exhausts my remaining time limit, leaves me in weakened state for several hours. Makes me vulnerable if additional threats emerge. Then we make sure no additional threats emerge. Nora Valkyrie declared with enthusiasm that made suicide missions sound fun. We go full offense, all-out assault, every semblance active, every quirk pushed to maximum. We hit Emissary and Grimm with everything simultaneously. Create opening for All Might to collapse portal, and then, she grinned. Then we deal with whatever's left standing. It's basically smash everything strategy. My favorite kind. The emissary laughed with genuine amusement that made her earlier menace seem restrained. You think you can drive me back? Collapse pathways I've spent hours establishing? You're children, students, barely trained, facing enemy that's existed for millennia. That studied humanity's every weakness. That knows exactly how to make you fail through exploiting fear and division that your societies cultivate. You can't. Ruby interrupted with silver eyes already beginning to glow. Her voice cutting through Emissary's monologue with certainty that transcended tactical assessment into absolute conviction. We can, because you made mistake. You assumed we'd fight like individuals, like factions, like we're divided by our differences. But we're not. We're heroes. From two different worlds, with two different power systems, with two completely different backgrounds. But we're all the same in ways that matter. We protect people. We stand against darkness. We refuse to let monsters win. That's not weakness you can exploit. That's strength you can't overcome. Because united heroes. She raised Crescent Rose while Class 1A, Team JNPR, and professional heroes all assumed combat positions in coordinated formation that transcended formal training into instinctive cooperation. United heroes are force that your corruption can't break. Watch. They moved as one. Ruby's silver eyes activating with controlled burst that made Grimm recoil, light that targeted their essential nature-clearing approach path. Yang and Bakugo engaging front line with explosive synergy, their combat styles meshing despite coming from different worlds. Weiss and Todoroki creating ice barriers that channeled Grimm into kill zones. Blake and Tokoyami using shadow-based abilities to strike from unexpected angles. Pyrrha's polarity and Midoriya's one for all combining to generate devastating combination attacks. The emissary attempted to counter through Grimm reinforcement and dark magic that Remnant's corruption had granted her. But coordinated assault from multiple power systems simultaneously proved overwhelming. Aura-based attacks she could defend against. Quirk-based assaults she could predict. But combination of both systems operating in tandem created tactical complexity that even centuries of experience couldn't immediately adapt to. All Might waited for opening that strategy demanded. His muscular form tensed with power that made atmosphere crackle, fist pulling back with wind pressure that made concrete crack beneath him. Ruby's silver eyes flared maximum intensity, light consuming Emissary's dark magic defenses, creating momentary vulnerability in Dimensional Tear's structure. Now! RWBY commanded with leadership that made 16-year-olds sound like veteran general. All Might moved with speed that made his earlier combat look restrained, fist striking Dimensional Tier's focal point with technique that defined his hero career. United States of Smash! The impact made reality scream. Not metaphorically. Actual sound that transcended audio range into physical force. Dimensional fabric compressed under pressure that exceeded what stable spacetime could withstand. Portal collapsing inward like star undergoing gravitational collapse. Aperture that had been bleeding Grimm into worlds sealed through overwhelming application of heroic conviction made kinetic. The emissary shrieked with rage rather than pain, her form being pulled back through collapsing portal. On dark magic insufficient to maintain presence when dimensional pathway was being eliminated. This isn't over. Salem will send others. We'll exploit weakness you've created. The portal sealed with finality that made her threats irrelevant, dimensional barriers snapping back to stable configuration with violence that made remaining Grimm begin destabilizing. Creatures losing connection to source of their manifestation, forms dissolving into shadows that dissipated under sunlight. Silence descended across battlefield as heroes, students, and even surviving villains processed what they'd just witnessed. Coordinated assault from two worlds' defenders accomplishing what either group alone couldn't have achieved. All Might collapsed to knee as his muscular form began smoking, time limit exhausted through United States of Smash. On symbol of peace, revealing true form that civilians rarely saw. Skeletal figure that years of fighting all for one had reduced to. Young heroes, All Might said with voice carrying despite weakened state. You've shown this world something it desperately needed to see. That cooperation transcends origin. That standing together matters more than power source. That heroes, he smiled despite exhaustion. That heroes are defined by what they protect, not where they're from. Welcome. His gesture encompassed Musutafu. Welcome to Hero Society. Officially. RWBY lowered crescent rows with tears streaming down face that combat adrenaline had kept suppressed. The emotional release that victory allowed. We didn't want this, didn't want to bring Grimm here, didn't want to make your world more dangerous, Her voice broke. We just wanted to go home. And instead, we brought apocalypse with us. How do we fix that? How do we make this right? By staying, Izuku Midoriya replied with conviction that One for All had given him clarity to express, his voice carrying across to dimensional refugees who'd become allies. By teaching us how to fight Grimm properly. By helping us understand aura and semblances and all the things your world developed to survive threats we've never encountered. He extended hand toward RWBY. By being heroes together. Because you're right that you brought danger here, but you also brought solution. Brought people who know how to fight what we don't understand. That's not curse, that's opportunity. A chance for both worlds to become stronger through learning from each other. RWBY looked at her team. Yang nodding with combat enthusiast grin. Weiss offering aristocratic approval. Blake showing rare smile. Then to JNPR, who'd been with them through everything. John's supportive expression, Pyrrha's champion confidence, Nora's enthusiastic agreement, Ren's calm acceptance. What do you think? RWBY asked with question that made leadership about consensus rather than command. Do we stay? Help this world learn to fight Grimm. Maybe learn about their quirks and hero society. Try to find way home while protecting people who need protecting. That's what Huntsmen do. Pyrrha confirmed with certainty that tournament championship had never given her, but protecting others had. We go where we're needed, fight what threatens innocence. And right now, she looked at Musutafu recovering from battle. Right now, this world needs us, needs what we know, needs proof that Grimm can be beaten. So yes, we stay, we help, we teach, and maybe, her voice carried hope. Maybe we learn that home isn't just place you're from. Sometimes it's place where what you do matters most. John stepped forward with leadership that he'd never expected to possess. Then it's decided. Team RWBY and Team JNPR formally request asylum in He paused. In whatever this dimension is called, we offer our services as Huntsmen, our experience fighting Grimm, our willingness to learn your ways while teaching ours. In exchange for, he looked at All Might, for chance to protect people who need protecting, because that's all we've ever wanted. Reason we trained, reason we fight. Reason we're standing here despite everything that's happened. We protect people. That's not complicated. That's just who we are. Principal Nezu appeared from observation position with expression mixing calculation and genuine enthusiasm. His high-spec intelligence having processed entire battle with speed that made his diminutive form seem larger. Asylum granted, pending proper documentation and legal formalities that I'll handle because bureaucracy is surprisingly enjoyable when you're hyper-intelligent. Welcome to UA High School, Teams RWBY and JNPR. You'll be integrated as special students with provisional hero licenses while we develop proper curriculum that accounts for your unique abilities. His enthusiasm was infectious. This is unprecedented educational opportunity, cross-dimensional cooperation, new power systems to study, cultural exchange that will revolutionize how we understand heroism itself. RWBY smiled despite exhaustion, despite displacement, despite knowing they'd brought apocalypse with them. Then I guess we're heroes in training. Again. In different world with different rules, but... She looked at Class 1A, who were approaching with expressions mixing curiosity, respect, and friendship. But same purpose. Protect people, fight monsters, and prove that hope matters more than fear. That's universal truth. Doesn't matter which dimension you're from. Bakugo extended fist toward Yang with grudging respect. You hit hard. For someone who's not using quirk, I still think my explosions are better, but... His grin suggested competition rather than hostility. But you're all right, for dimensional refugee. We'll train together, see whose combat style is superior, and maybe... He glanced at Grimm, remains dissolving. Maybe you teach me how to punch monsters that don't follow normal rules. Could be useful. Yang bumped his fist with matching grin. Deal. But warning, I'm very competitive. And I have sister who needs good sparring partners, and team of friends who are all various levels of combat crazy. You're about to discover that Huntsman training makes hero courses look relaxing. Hope you're ready for that. Bring it, Bakugo replied with enthusiasm that made impossible training regimens sound appealing. And across Musutafu, as dimensional tiers finally sealed completely and remaining Grimm dissolved into nothing, two worlds began process of integration that would change both forever. Heroes learning about aura and semblances, Huntsmen learning about quirks and hero society, students from different dimensions discovering that sometimes displacement meant finding exactly where you needed to be. The Grimm would return. Salem wouldn't abandon dimension she'd discovered. League of Villains would exploit chaos that dimensional breach created. But for now, for this moment, 8 Huntsmen from Remnant and heroes from World of Quirks stood together, proving that sometimes the greatest power wasn't strength or speed or supernatural ability. Sometimes it was simply refusing to let monsters win, regardless of which dimension those monsters came from. To be continued.